Today, let's learn how to make professional grade cabinet boxes and jam-pack an industrial planer while making face frames.
Oh, it's everywhere.
But first things first.
Well, I'm sick of this tiny little shop, so...
It worked! This is my 2,500 square foot warehouse. That is 10 times more area than the single car garage I was just working in. With that being said, it's time to get this project started.
So despite my seemingly inexperienced footage of my mistakes, I really am going to show you how to build true professional manufacturer-grade cabinets in this two-part series, building a fully decked out laundry room. Now normally I would start breaking down my plywood with a track saw in order to manage it in smaller pieces, but since my hard work has finally paid off, I have a few more feet of space to manage full-size sheets on the table saw. I'll break down how I build the boxes and with what. A typical cabinet has two sides, either with a toe kick attached or in this case detached, and I'll tell you why later. One base, center, and top, a back, and some stretchers to hold it all together. The base and back are dadoed into the sides, and everything is held together with glue and pocket holes. I use pre-finished maple veneer plywood because it produces very high-grade cabinets. I always start cutting the cabinet sides first. The reason why I do this is because, well, I don't really have a good reason. I just like to start with larger items for an efficient use of sheet goods. In this case, I'm obviously using the table saw for every cut, including cross cuts with a sled. Some people claim it's dangerous to use the fence as a stop block because the panel could bind and kick back. Although I've never had an issue as long as the crosscut sled is supporting it through the cut. So for the safety crew out there, here's a safer cut with the track saw. The design for this laundry room has a lot of odds and ends, so just hold on for the ride and I'll explain everything. I have already cut the sides and base panels for the two upright cabinets, and still need the thinner panels for the bench supports, nook, clothes hanger, and wall cabinet. Those thinner pieces can be cut along with my camera. That was a close one. Then they can be cross-cut in the same manner as the others, this time with auxiliary support. Now we can add a lot of strength to the design by cutting dados. They certainly aren't absolutely necessary, but if you are choosing to cut them, cut a test piece before you go hogging away today's overpriced plywood. Trust me. This method uses a dado stack, but you can also use a router and a guide to achieve the same thing. I just prefer the dust collection this way. For the end cuts, it's fairly safe without support like a sled. But for cuts near the center of a long panel, I strongly recommend using a sled, a stop block, and extra support for the sled itself. I have had this table saw grab a panel with the fat dado stack and throw it at my manhood twice before because I failed to follow the tips I previously mentioned. Moving onward, what I didn't precisely show you is that I cut the cabinet base panels less wide than the sides, and now I'm using them as a reference to know where to place the back dado. You can see here that the base panel is flush with the back panel dado, then the back panel can overlap the edge and get stapled in place. I also cut a rabbet on the front edges to make the final thickness a ½ inch, and I'll show you why later. And there they are, a finished set of sides. Now I can fumble around for the rest of the day forgetting everything I've ever learned building large cabinets. It's like he just doesn't learn. Looks like he's remembering, and this isn't even the final assembly. I'm just trying to dry fit everything together to get a proper measurement for the stretchers. And there it is. Cutting all of them together ensures that they're all identical. But of course, they are too loose, so I recut new ones and now with a perfect fit. With everything cut and tested for each different cabinet, I can drill pocket holes in the non-show sides of the connecting panels and stretchers. This is what full speed looks like with time and practice. Incredible. I know. I always drill test pieces when I switch between thicknesses of ply because the projection of the drill bit changes. You definitely don't want screws poking out the show side of your cabinet. Some finishing touches before assembly include cleaning up the leftover edge on one set of sides. I honestly should have designed the side longer to avoid this situation. Then the 1/4 inch backs can be muscled onto the saw and cut. These are honestly pretty light. I don't know why I look so weak on camera. And now the track saw helps cut the wider tower panel to length. Now we can start the assembly, and I'll help you understand some of the reasons and nuance behind this method. First of all, the dados cut away the finished plywood and expose fresh grain to glue to. The dado, or in this case, the rabbet, helps locate the position of the panel to a very exact tolerance, given that the cuts are accurate. The pocket hole screws provide a clamping mechanism as well as an extreme amount of strength with the glue and dado together. So much so that not only can you stand on these boxes, you can go wild on these boxes. If you don't believe me, stick around until the end and I'll show you. When the connecting panels are mounted, the back can get glued into its dado. With the back, the base, and the stretcher all aligned, I can staple only this assembly together. This registers everything as square and keeps the back from falling as I assemble the other side. With glue in the dados, I can persuade the other side into place. Notice in this clip how this top panel is back set 3/16 of an inch. I'll explain this when we make the face frames. Now the rest of the pocket holes can be sunk, taking extra precaution that the screws aren't ever driving too far and poking through. Then the top and middle panels can be stapled to the back. And don't forget on the heavy cabinets, adding temporary cleats to the bottom protects the fragile edges of the ply. The whole thing can be leveraged to the ground and slid to the side thanks to the protective cleats we added. To your surprise, this is only half speed, so I'll show you full speed. Alright, you caught me. I may not be quite as fast as I showed you, and by the way, if you decide you don't want to do dados, here's how I would assemble it. My wall cabinet is made of 1/2 inch ply with no rabbets or dados. Just mark where you want to position the connecting panel, then sink the screws. The rest of the assembly is the same as you already saw. The fabrication of the other components is pretty straightforward, so I'll breeze through it. If you get lost, I put chapters in the description so you can navigate each section. I thin the 3/4 panels down to 1/2 inch on the front edge for the nook. Then I can pre-sand everything that will be painted and assemble everything without grooves, just fastening with brad nails and screws. To be as precise as possible, I use a pre-cut board that matches the width I want to achieve. Then I can screw each dividing panel in succession. Using the same method, I can screw the shelves into place for the upper nooks. One side can be screwed straight in, and the other side has to be screwed diagonally with finish screws. Then I can add temporary end pieces to support the outer shelf as well as bottom runners to keep everything protected and in the right place. Lastly, it's smart to do a first coat of filler now. It will likely need another coat before finishing. The nook is complete and we'll make the frame for it in this video. The clothes hanger is a simple design with a 1/2 inch top, a 1/2 inch back panel, and a 3/4 center divider. All screwed together, easy enough. The toe kicks for the tall cabinets are built separately with 3/4 plywood. They are, of course, tacked and screwed together. The reason why you have to keep the toe kicks separate is due to the install. If the toe kick is attached, the cabinet is often not able to be tilted upright without scraping the ceiling. So instead, the toe kick is installed, then the cabinet can be tilted upright and lifted onto its platform. On this tower cabinet, I left the toe kick back set about 2.5 inches so that the faux leg assembly can fill the void and end flush with the outer cabinet, so they can be set aside and it's time to work on the face frames. For the doors and face frames, I'm going to choose to mill my own lumber, although I know most of you probably don't have a fancy joiner or even access to rough cut lumber. In that case, you can go to my walnut vanity video where I show how to utilize pre-milled lumber that isn't straight and has warps. Before I mill lumber, I look for the straightest maple boards that I can use for the longest pieces. I'm simultaneously milling the lumber for the doors, but I'll be showing you that process in part 2. I purchased this giant 3-phase joiner that can handle 16-inch wide boards, so I don't have to rip my boards thinner before milling. With the crown of the board facing up, I can run it through a few passes to flatten the one side. And the wider boards took more muscle to push than I originally thought, but I am a wuss. For the smaller boards, it's definitely worth shifting the heavy-duty rack and pinion fence forward so I don't have to lean as far. This also distributes the wear on the blades evenly. Then I can run the flat side against the fence to straighten one edge. The boards with more warp are dedicated for smaller components, so they are cut shorter before milling. The shorter the board is, the less material has to be taken off to straighten it. Now I can roll them over to the giant 25-inch planer. This planer has 15 horsepower. In comparison, most large motors are around 3 to 5 horsepower. I actually bought this unit used, and I'm starting to see that the cutter heads need to be turned to a fresh side, so I might as well get it done now. Trust me on this, I contemplated wearing gloves, but 174 individual knives would take me the rest of the month to finish without the dexterity of bare fingers. Now the boards are coming out silky smooth. Apparently I forgot to check my little dust collector.
Oh, it's everywhere. Oh, man.
It's horrible. It is all inside of there.
It is completely jam-packed.
That stuff's so fluffy, it just fills it right up and backs it all the way up to the planer. The reason I'm even using this small dust collector is because I don't have my large Laguna set up yet. And this poor little baby can't handle the magnitude of that big old planer. I managed to get the mess cleaned up, and these maple shavings will be donated to horses. Lastly, I ripped the boards to rough width to finish the milling process. Most of the long stock gets turned into long stiles of the face frames. The final width will be 1.5 inches. Although maple likes to warp when it's cut into strips, so they are cut with about 3/16 of extra width. Then cut to rough length, and re-straightened on the joiner. An alternate way to straighten a board is to run the hollow side against a long fence on the table saw, then just flipping it over and cutting it to final width. For me, I'll just run the flat side against the bed of the planer to thickness them to final width. But as you can see, I'm not very well practiced yet. I'm also choosing to dado my face frames. There will be 2 different orientations, a centered groove and offset 5/16 from the edge. The centered dado will be used if the face frame needs to be centered with the panel, like with the nook, or if I want it to protrude from the cabinet so it fits tightly against the wall. The offset dado is used when the face frame is just proud or nearly flush with the shelf, like the horizontal sections of the nook and base panels in the cabinet. The best way to know if your face frame fits your cabinet is by building it directly on the box. Starting with the side stiles, the areas where the cross sections interfere have to be cut out. So I mark them in place, cut with a Japanese saw, and roughly chisel the sections out. Cleanliness is not very important here. Now the stiles seat nicely, and I can measure and verify the total width is correct, then measure what length I need to cut the rails to. Sneaking up on a nice fit is crucial here, and a confirmation of the first cut tells me I can cut the rest. The joinery I'm choosing is dominoes, but you can use dowel jig or even pocket hole screws from the back side. With the bottom rail dry fit together, I can locate the next two drawer stiles using scrap wood cut to the correct length. The mortises can be cut and everything can be glued together. And by the way, if you are enjoying this video or just think I've earned it, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you don't miss my future videos. I'm constantly finding ways to improve my production and increase value for you as the viewer. I'm also open to constructive criticism, so if you have any suggestions on how my videos can have more value to you, feel free to leave me a comment. Don't forget to clamp a square to the frame assembly, and the best place to put it is back on the cabinet to dry. If you remember, the top panel is backset, so this rail isn't actually dadoed because it's easiest to have the bottom rail locate everything and have the top rail free to move up and down as needed. The nook is fabricated similarly, with each piece individually fitted into place. In this case, the central rails have to be glued into place before joining the top. I bring the assembly over to the main unit to do the final clamp up. I'm not gluing the frame to the box though until after finishing. The face frames are temporarily held on with pocket holes wherever they will be hidden. Glue will be added later. And as proof that these cabinets really are extremely strong, here's a little weird clip that I created just for you.